morning. It's Friday, the 2nd of May.
Also ahead, a 50% leap in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Police say cheap alcohol is to blame.
Rangers cap a memorable week for British football as Walter Smith's side reach the UEFA Cup final.
The number of companies going out of business is set to rise. We'll look ahead to the figures.
And the bank holiday weekend weather, a little bit more disappointing than we'd hoped. It's going to be bright rather than wall-to-wall sunshine. There will all see some rain at times, but it will be warmer. But I'm not sure if that's good for cutting the grass or not, Tim.
Well, when it comes to mowing the lawn, it seems forget petrol or electric mowers. More of us are getting back to basics and opting for hand-push mowers instead. I'll find out why a little later.
Good morning. First, our main story this morning. It's been a terrible night for the government in local elections across England and Wales. Labour are on course for their worst electoral performance in nearly 40 years.
Yes, the Conservatives say they're confident of picking up 200 seats in all. The Liberal Democrats have beaten Labour into third place.
With nearly two-thirds of the results in, here's how things stand. The Conservatives have won 45 councils. That's up 8. Labour have won 14, a loss of 6. The Lib Dems got 6 councils and that's down 1. 36 councils were hung. That's a drop of 1.
In the BBC's projected national share of the vote, the Conservatives are at 44%. That's 20 points ahead of Labour on 24%, who've been beaten into third place by the Liberal Democrats on 25%, with others on 7%.
Well, our political correspondent Vicky Young has been following developments overnight. Vicky, it's been a shocker for Labour.
It has. I think they were prepared for a bad night, but they'll be truly horrified by what they're watching. Remember, 10 months ago, Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair, offering a change, offering new thinking, offering a fresh leadership style. But his first test at the polls has been a disaster, and it's left the Tories riding high.
Harris Jacqueline Maureen, 1,656.
Jubilant Conservatives celebrate in Bury, taking control of the council here, a sign, they say, that the party can beat Labour in its heartlands. The news was bad for Labour in the south of England too, with an unexpected loss in Southampton. For Cabinet Ministers, it was time to put on a brave face.
I'm proud of what we've done over the last 10 years, and I think we've now got to go back to voters and say, we've heard about the issues you're talking about. We're going to get through the difficult time we've got at the moment with the international credit crunch and food prices and petrol and so on, and we will get back to what you've enjoyed over the last 10 years in the south, and that has been, for the great majority of people, rising standards of living, better public services.
After mounting criticism of his leadership, Gordon Brown has already said he's listening and learning. But Labour's worst performance in local elections since the late 60s will leave his MPs jittery and the Conservatives on a high.
I think the Labour Party has left tonight licking its wounds. It's had a very, very bad night. It deserves to have had a very, very bad night. It's now entirely up to Labour whether or not it actually listens to people and understands that it has got things wrong and that it's not just entitled to be in power.
It's a first test at the polls for the Lib Dem leader too, and for Nick Clegg it's been a mixed night, with his party losing West Lindsey and Pendle but gaining Hull and St Albans.
I think it isn't just a question of disaffection with the Labour government. We've become entrenched in many parts of local government, and for the most part, obviously there are exceptions, I think people like what we've delivered.
Ministers are blaming Labour's poor performance on mid-term blues and difficult economic circumstances. But with the party losing seats in traditional Labour areas across Wales and England, their thoughts will turn anxiously to a general election. Now, of course, it's important to remember this wasn't a general election, but of course, inevitably, Labour MPs will be thinking about their own seats and what's going to happen when that general election comes.
And of course, there is another significant, big result that we're awaiting this afternoon, this evening, and that, of course, is who is going to be the Mayor of London.
Yes, this has been the Boris and Ken show. I think no one can argue with that, despite Brian Paddock's best efforts by the Liberal Democrats. We don't get that result until this evening, as you say, but that is going to be very much a mood thing, really, I think. If Boris Johnson can win that seat for London for the Tories, that will give them a big boost, and of course it will be seen as another disaster for Labour. But it's important in London, of course, because so many marginal seats are in London, that everyone will be seeing that as some kind of guide as to what might happen in the future.
OK, Vicky, for now, thanks very much.
Yes, just to let you know, of course, there's plenty more detail on the local election results at bbc.co.uk/elections. You can go there, type in your postcode, and you can find out how things have turned out in your area. That will, of course, be updated as the results come in throughout this morning and the day.
Indeed, it will, and there's much more on the elections to come on Breakfast this morning. Jeremy Vine's using his box of tricks to crunch the numbers for us. We're going to be live in Wales, where every council has been up for grabs, and we will be speaking to all the main parties throughout the programme.
Yes, and just remember, you can, of course, send us your thoughts, your comments. All the ways of getting in touch should be on the screen right now.
Now, 6 minutes past 6, let's look at this morning's other main news. There's been a dramatic rise in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Figures from police forces across the country show that incidents have jumped by more than half in the past 5 years.
It's not a pretty sight. Women falling out of pubs, barely able to walk or talk. But police say it's becoming more and more common. The police figures show a 50% rise in the number of females arrested for drunk and disorderly compared to 5 years ago. From 2003 to 2004, 85 women were held for being drunk in Cheshire. Last year, that rose to 200. In Essex, the numbers are up from 112 to 204 for the same period. And in North Yorkshire, the figures went from 135 to 209. Police say supermarkets are partly to blame for the increase in the number of women who are binge drinking because they offer cheap alcohol. And the finger is also being pointed at pubs and clubs that target women with special offers and happy hour drinking. In the past, adverts have been used to try to educate people about the dangers of alcohol, but it appears that the message isn't getting through. The authorities say more action is needed and that calling time on cheap drink, happy hours and alcohol advertising would be a good place to start. Wendy Urquhart, BBC News.
Talks are to be held in London today between the Palestinian Prime Minister and key foreign ministers. Aid agencies are hoping it will bring an end to Israel's blockade of Gaza. They say the restriction on the supply of medicine, food and fuel is leading to a humanitarian crisis.
A team of British police officers is visiting Moscow to discuss security ahead of the first All-English Champions League final. They'll be working alongside Russian authorities preparing for the 50,000 fans expected to attend the match on May the 21st at the Luzhniki Stadium.
The Olympic torch is in Hong Kong on the latest leg of a global tour that's been overshadowed by protest. It's being carried through the streets in an 8-hour relay. Chinese supporters have lined the route and there have been few protests so far.
The Hollywood actress Uma Thurman has been in court to face a man accused of stalking her. The Kill Bill star said his letter writing and attempts to meet her had left her feeling panicked and frightened.
Not a day Uma Thurman's looked forward to.
Today.
And far from the kind of entrance the star normally makes. This is the man who's been described as a menacing presence in the lives of her family, former psychiatric patient Jack Jordan. Between 2005 and 2007, he called them and sent constant letters and emails. Like this postcard Uma Thurman read out in court, highlighted are the words, "My hands should be on your body at all times." Face to face with Jack Jordan for the first time, the star looked visibly upset, her voice shaking as she described how she'd feared for her life and been scared to go home because he was sleeping outside in his car. His lawyers say he's not criminal, just creepy.
The outcome I'm hoping for is that the jury sees that even though his actions seemed obsessive and excessive, that he never ever formed the intent to annoy, threaten, alarm, or harass her, and he didn't think that he was scaring her at the time.
Prosecutors admit that in some ways unwanted attention is an occupational hazard with fame like this, but they say it's time to tell Jack Jordan enough is enough. Heather Alexander, BBC News, New York.
A teddy bear has become a surrogate mum to a baby monkey born at London Zoo. Little Conchita's mother is too ill to care for her. She's only the second white-naped mega baby ever born in the UK, one of the most endangered species in the world.
When she's a little bit older and she's on solid food, we will then begin the reintroduction process, probably in about another 2 to 3 months. We'll start with her mum, obviously, and see how that goes, and then moving on to the other members of the group, and then finally the father.
It's quite interesting, that necklace, wasn't she? Oh, those
so
are
have you recovered
stories.
from R-ing there?
I know it. Oh.
Morning,
Sue,
to you.
how are you?
I'm very well. I imagine that my head's a little bit clearer, though, than the Rangers fans after
yes.
last night's epic
They'll be
encounter.
saying, ah.
Ah, yeah, for a different reason. Good morning to you. Rangers are through to their first European final for 36 years. Walter Smith's side beat Fiorentina on penalties after a goalless draw in Florence to reach the final in Manchester on May the 14th. Rangers keeper Neil Alexander pulled off a great save to cancel out an earlier miss from captain Barry Ferguson. After Christian Vieri blasted over, it was left to Nacho Novo to slot home the winning spot kick. Rangers will now face Russian side Zenit St. Petersburg, who are coached, incidentally, by former Rangers manager Dick Advocaat. Leeds United have failed in their bid to have their 15-point penalty overturned. An independent arbitration panel rejected the club's appeal against the deduction, which had been imposed by the Football League for breaking rules on insolvency. It means that Leeds miss out on automatic promotion, but they can still go up to the Championship via the playoffs. Ronnie O'Sullivan and Stephen Hendry will resume their semi-final at the World Snooker Championship in Sheffield, level at 4 frames all. Hendry started with a clearance of 140 as he built a 4-1 lead, but O'Sullivan hit back to win the last 3 frames of the opening session. In the other semi-final, Joe Perry leads Ali Carter by 5 frames to 3. We'll have more sport for you in about 20 minutes' time, so I'll see you then. Back to you guys.
So thank you very much. We'll take a quick look through some of the front pages now. Obviously, too early for them to get the results from the election last night. Daily Express here, they're looking at the rising costs of household bills, looking specifically at manufacturing costs, the cost of things that we buy, they say, getting a lot more expensive.
The front of the Daily Mirror this morning, more details or allegations on that story of the children and grandchildren kept in the cellar in Amstetten in Austria. Joseph Fritzl apparently allegedly warned the family he kept locked he would gas them if they tried to escape.
Front page of the Daily Telegraph, their lead story is what they say is Chinese building secret nuclear submarine bases. They've got various pictures, this picture taken from the sky, satellite pictures pinpointing the places where these have been built. And the column down here you can say is suggesting that Gordon Brown will fight back on policy. A couple of suggestions as to what he might be doing to recover from today's results.
The Times this morning says that around 24,000 teachers ranked as incompetent should be removed from classrooms and put to work in neighbouring schools, something which has sparked some controversy.
Front page of the Daily Mail, the big picture there you can see is Kate McCann, a series of interviews she did yesterday, and the story here, the rise of the girl drunks. We mentioned this a moment or two ago. Arrests of young women for drunkenness leap 50%. That's over the past 5 years.
And The Independent this morning, more than 7 in 10 voters insist they would not be willing to pay higher taxes to fund projects to combat climate change, according to a poll. Should we look inside the paper? See
Yeah,
what they've got?
one or two of the lighter stories in the inside pages. Have a look at this one. Look closely at this bottle of cider that was found in Darlington by a taxi driver. Now, you can see it looks fairly normal there, but check carefully the top. And the owner of this, the guy who bought it, says, Mr. Cartwright says, sure enough, it's an image of Jesus Christ. Can you see it there? I'm
when
not
you
sure if
say
get
sure
close.
enough...
Well, I mean, actually, this one here, compared with some of them, that one there isn't too bad. But they make the point...
enormous eye.
Well, yes, he's got big... Granted, he's got very big eyes and slightly distorted features. But nonetheless, there you go.
Look, I don't mean to dismiss it out of hand, but it looks like an air bubble.
OK. You're not convinced,
Let's have a look at a story in the Daily Telegraph this morning. Charity shop staff at this Cancer Research UK shop are trying to find out who the mystery donor of 20 brand new wedding dresses. Look at these women. They're thrilled to bits that they've managed to get a wedding dress.
Do you mean it was one person who sent in 20 dresses?
Yeah, the designer gowns dropped off in cardboard boxes. They're worth up to £1,000 each. Because it's not cheap, is it, buying a wedding
Have you got a theory?
They're on sale for between £100 and £250. It must be someone who runs a bridal shop and they've just, they're slightly shop soiled or something. I don't think someone thought they were going to get married 20 times and bought 20 different dresses.
That'd be tragic.
But who knows?
Declan, there you are. What have you got for us this morning?
Hello. Well, the most extraordinary story you're going to see in any of the business pages today is about the boss of Marks & Spencer and a karaoke bar company. So Stuart Rose has been forced to sell a private investment he'd made in a karaoke bar company. Now, it was his own money, so what's the problem, you might think? Well, the problem is that the karaoke bar company was, in fact, owned by Martha Lane Fox. Now, remember her from lastminute.com? Well, she's also a director of Marks & Spencer and one of the people who supervises executive pay. So Sir Stuart has sold out of the company that was called Lucky Voice, or is now being dubbed Unlucky Voice. Elsewhere, the number 3 boss of Barclays has walked out. The papers are talking this up as a sign of tension between the top 2 bosses at Barclays, but the man who's leaving says he's going simply because he has done all that he wanted to do. And you'll see a lot of stuff in the papers today about bankruptcy and insolvency figures. Now, those are out at 9:30 this morning. They're expected to show a rise in the number of companies going out of business. The number of people going insolvent remains flat. And one other thing to watch out for today, it's news on the housing market. That comes from the Halifax at 8 o'clock. Shares yesterday, unchanged.
Declan, thank you very much indeed.
Time now, 16 minutes past 6. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning. Labour has suffered its worst losses in local elections in England and Wales for nearly 40 years.
The Conservatives have made strong gains. They say they'll pick up 200 seats.
Yes, and coming up in the programme.
I'm going to start a job soon and I'll be getting paid about £150 a week.
And he'll brag about that.
Not everyone would be happy telling colleagues how much they earn, but could it be the best way to tackle pay inequality?
I just know what you're going to ask. I know what you're going to ask. Let's find out if we'll escape the rain this weekend with Carol. Morning, Carol.
Good morning. I knew you were going to ask that too, actually. And you know what? We're not. All of us at some stage this weekend will see some rain. The forecast is a wee bit more disappointing than the picture I painted yesterday. For the east, yesterday it looked like we'd have some good sunshine, but it will probably be bright, although there will be some sunshine around. Rather like this morning, it's bright, but there is some sunshine. Mind you, it's chilly. Temperatures have dipped down as low as 3 degrees Celsius overnight. But you can see in the satellite a lot of sunshine around, some cloud cover. First thing this morning too, there's some patchy mist and some patchy fog in the southeast, but that should clear. Also some showers around, and as we move up the country into the north of England, here too we're not immune to some showers, but there'll be some sunshine and nippy if you're heading out. Nippy across parts of Scotland with still the showers. And of course the picture we're looking at now is 9 o'clock in the morning. For Northern Ireland, a glorious start to the day. Again, we're looking at some good sunny spells, 6 degrees Celsius being the temperature at 9. And then as we slide back towards Wales, well, again some sunshine, but still those showers and some sunshine into the southwest and along the south coast. Now, as we go through the course of the day, we'll continue with some of the showers over Scotland in particular. Some of them will be heavy with hail and also thunder thrown in, just like in the last few days. But a fairly pleasant day with temperatures up a touch compared to what we've been used to in the last few days. We're looking at a high of round about 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 Fahrenheit. Then through this evening and overnight, a lot of the showers will die away, but the cloud already will be thickening in the southwestern approaches, introducing some rain and drizzle, which will turn heavier in the west as we go through the night. And you can see how it moves steadily eastwards, erratically it has to be said, through the course of tomorrow. So to the north of that, quite cloudy over Scotland and Northern Ireland, and to the far southeast, still some sunshine and getting warmer. Then on Sunday, more rain coming our way, heading from the west towards the east. Ahead of it there will be some cloud, and whilst we're on the subject of the bank holiday weekend, if you're off on Monday, it looks like that rain's going to head south. The positioning of it at the moment, a little bit uncertain, but it looks like for Scotland and Northern Ireland it could be a fine day, and the same for the southeast. But really the trend is that it is getting warmer. And that's the forecast. Back to you two.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed. So, very bad local election results overnight for Labour. No news yet, of course, in the race to be London Mayor.
Let's speak now to David Thompson, who's at City Hall for us this morning. David, the Boris and Ken race is on. Just take us through what's happened so far. What do we know, and when will we know those results?
Well, good morning from City Hall, and of course, London may already be waking up to a new mayor because, the people have voted, the city's made its decision. Unfortunately, we don't know what that decision is yet because the votes haven't been counted just yet. They're going to be starting that in about a couple of hours' time. And we should know the final result by hopefully around any time from tea time onwards. Now, at the moment, the Conservatives are very bullish about Boris Johnson's chances. They think they've done it. But Ken Livingstone was very confident too. So really, it's too close to call. And we will know in about 12 hours' time or so. If Boris Johnson wins, it's the icing on the cake for David Cameron on a very good night for the Conservatives. But if Ken can hold on to power, it's at least some crumbs of comfort for Gordon Brown.
David, thank you very much for that. We'll be back with you a little later in the programme.
It's a great night for the Conservatives. Traditionally, they do well in the southeast, but even there they made gains overnight. Paul Seagert is the BBC's political correspondent in the southeast. He's in Hastings. Just give us an idea of the picture there, Paul.
Well, they didn't do as well here, the Conservatives, as they have done in other parts of the country. They are clearly the dominant force in the southeast, but they started out last night hoping to win 2 seats that were currently hung, and they only managed to win one of them, although it was a great victory from their point of view. The seat of Maidstone has been hung for the last 25 years, but in the early hours of this morning that changed when the Conservatives gained the 2 seats they needed to take control of the council for the first time since 1982. Of course, back in those days, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister. Interest rates were at 10%, and a litre of petrol would cost you just 40p, so a rather different world now, but they've won control there. But they didn't manage it in Hastings, although they did come very, very close. One of the seats needed 6 recounts. They still couldn't separate the Conservative candidate and the Liberal Democrat candidate, so they had to draw lots. It was the Liberal Democrat candidate who drew the winning lot, and that stopped the Conservatives from taking control of the council. So Hastings remains hung. Back to you.
Paul Seagert, thanks very much indeed. Paul Seagert reporting from Hastings for us.
Voting, of course, only took place in Wales and in parts of England, so can we draw any conclusions about what the results might mean in the event of a general election? Well, David Cowling is head of political research at the BBC. Good morning to you. You've had a long night watching these results come in.
Yes.
Just take us through, what can we take from this result as to what might happen in the event of a general election?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a local election. The turnout was about 35%, so I think one has to be a bit cautious about projecting what happened yesterday and will happen as we discover it later on today, because 1/3 of the councils that polled last night actually won't start counting until today. But the truth of it is, I think, that unambiguously the Conservatives have had a remarkable night. On our projected national share, they're at 44%, Labour at 24%, and the Lib Dems at 25%. Now, those figures may change a little, but they're not going to change in any significant way. So that's unambiguously, as I say, a good result for the Conservatives. The Conservatives have made gains in the north. One of the criticisms, as we know, in the past has been that they are a southern party. So they have much to get, much encouragement to get from this. And for Labour, I mean, it's been through a fairly awful set of meat grinding experiences in recent months. None of that will change, I suspect, as a result of these figures.
And now, parallels are being drawn between now and 1997 and the John Major situation and the results then, and Tony Blair arriving in that great fanfare of success. Now, what is the similarity, if any?
Well, there is a certain similarity that in 1995, the position of these figures, the Conservatives on 44, Labour 24, were virtually reversed. So Labour had this massive lead over the Conservatives. But I've been looking at the figures, and none of this takes away from the Conservative success of last night. However, things were different in those days, because in 1995, in the month before those elections, where Labour did, as the Conservatives have done today, the Labour leads in the national opinion polls, how would you vote in a general election, the average lead was 28%. Now, in the month preceding the elections we had last night, the Conservative lead was about 9%. Now, that's still a lead, but it isn't 28%. So I suppose for Labour, the small crumb of comfort is that if that 9% stays there, that is recoverable, whereas a 28% lead wasn't and didn't appear to be by 97.
And just to mention on the Liberal Democrats, as to how their performance compares with how they've done in the past. Slightly worse, if anything, but they're claiming this effectively as a victory because they're in second place.
Yes, and you know, one wouldn't want to gainsay any crumbs they can get from it. I think the thing that they must worry about, though, is that last year was the worst set of losses for them for over 30 years. And they're 1% down, it seems, on that year. Now, the losses aren't anything like as significant. They may make some small net gains, but it's not what comfort they get from being in second place, I think, has to be qualified by the fact that a year ago, under Min Campbell's leadership, those losses were sufficient to help contribute towards Min Campbell's departure. Nick Clegg, so far, hasn't really been able to improve on that.
All right, we will leave it there for now. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Coming up here on Breakfast, the cutting edge of gardening chic will be looking at the triumphant return of the manual mower. Stay with us. Now we go to see what's happening where you are this morning.
Good morning. The Conservatives say David Cameron is on course to become Prime Minister after they took control of Bury, a key target in last night's local elections. The town was seen as a barometer of the national mood, and the Tories gained the 3 seats they needed to win power there. Annabelle Tiffin reports.
Jubilant scenes in Bury as the Tories took control of the council for the first time since 1986. They needed 3 seats, and by 1:30 in the morning, it was mission accomplished.
Absolutely delighted. This has taken 22 years for Bury to come back and take control of Bury Council, overall control. It's been brilliant.
Bury Council was the Conservatives' key target in the country, so the result wasn't a massive surprise, but still a bitter pill for Labour to swallow.
We knew we had seats at risk. But overall, you know, although we're sad at losing 4 seats, losing 4 good Labour councillors, this could have been much worse.
David Cameron is due to arrive here this morning to join in the Tory celebrations.
Although it was a bad night for Labour nationally, they performed well in Liverpool. At one stage, they wiped out the Liberal Democrat majority in the city, but they regained power by persuading a former Labour councillor to defect. Our political editor, David Woodthorpe, reports.
Smiles in Liverpool as Labour made 4 gains and the Liberal Democrats lost control of the council for the first time in 10 years. But a swift bit of political horse trading saw an independent councillor join the Lib Dem ranks, and the town hall was once again theirs, to the anger of Labour.
As far as I'm concerned, it was a good night for the Labour Party here. The fact that an independent is defected to prop up a failed administration is clearly not good for the city of Liverpool. As far as we're concerned, the people are disillusioned, disheartened with the Liberal Democrats, and that's why we've took 4 seats.
Elsewhere, Labour lost 7 seats in Oldham and fell behind the Lib Dems, and 4 seats in Wigan. In Pendle, the Lib Dems lost 8 seats and control of the council.
One of the strongest supporters of Greater Manchester's proposed congestion charge lost his seat last night. Councillor Roger Jones, the chairman of the area's Passenger Transport Authority, was beaten by a community action candidate in Salford. And you can find out the election results in your area by logging on to bbc.co.uk/news and typing in your postcode. Other news now, and a prison officer and 3 inmates have been injured during a serious disturbance at Risley Jail in Warrington. The prison service says a series of fights broke out in the exercise yard at about 6:45 last night. A prison officer was hurt as staff sought to quell the trouble. The 3 injured inmates needed hospital treatment. Up to 100 fuel protesters briefly blocked the entrance to the Stanlow oil refinery in Cheshire last night. At one stage, they prevented a number of tankers getting through, but Cheshire Police cleared the road and access to the plant returned to normal. The protesters, mainly farmers and hauliers, are angry at the amount of tax the government's taking from higher fuel prices.
Just give us a 2p back on the fuel and have either the government use their powers, as they have done to rob us all, to get escalators set up for the haulage industry, agricultural industry, or give them a tax rebate on it.
And to look at the weather, a dry start, then a mixture of sunny spells and heavy, possibly thundery showers, dying out towards evening. Travel news now, and in Cheshire, the M6 northbound closed due to an accident between Middlewich Holmes Chapel and Knutsford. And on the East Lancs Road in Lee, it's partially blocked due to an overturned lorry at Warrington Road. That's it for now. I'm back in half an hour.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Susanna Reid and Charlie State.
Our main story this morning, it's been a terrible night for the government in local elections across England and Wales. Labour are on course for their worst electoral performance in nearly 40 years.
Yes, the Conservatives say they're confident of picking up 200 seats. The Liberal Democrats look to have beaten Labour into 3rd place.
With nearly 2/3 of the results in. Here's how things stand this morning. The Conservatives have won 45 councils, that's up 8. Labour have won 14, that's a loss of 6. The Lib Dems got 6 councils, that's down 1. And 36 councils were hung, a drop of 1.
Yes, in the BBC's projected national share of the vote, the Conservatives are at 44%. That's 20 points ahead of Labour on 24%, who've been beaten into 3rd place by the Liberal Democrats on 25%, with others on 7%.
Our political correspondent Vicky Young has been following developments overnight. Vicky, very good morning to you. Is this result as clear-cut as it appears to be?
I think it is, really. I mean, Labour were clearly expecting a bad night, but they'll be pretty shocked about how bad it is. And really, I think it's interesting. These are, of course, local elections. It's not the general election. The turnout's about 35%, so lots of people aren't voting. But it's all about mood and momentum. And I think for the Labour Party, for Gordon Brown, of course, trying to turn things round for the Labour Party, this is not good news for him. And it makes his backbenchers restless. They're all going to be thinking, of course, about a general election and about whether they are going to hold their seats or not. I think for the Conservatives, it was definitely about momentum. They'd got to about 40% in the polls. They'll be very pleased to break through that and to show that they're moving forward. And David Cameron will be pleased that they seem to be making some kind of progression. I think for the Liberal Democrats, it's a very mixed night for them. They have, of course, pushed Labour into third place, which they'll be delighted about. But, of course, there are councils, they've lost some, they've won some. I think really fair to say Nick Clegg hasn't quite made an impact yet, but it's early days. He hasn't been the leader for that long.
OK, Vicky, for now, thank you.
Yes, well, voting, of course, took place all across Wales. Our correspondent, Wera Davis, has details of all the winners and losers there. Wera, just take us through the results, if you would.
Well, you know, back a few years ago, if Labour was doing badly in the rest of the UK, they could always take comfort in what was happening in Wales. They could always point to holds, to gains in Wales. It's been a disastrous night for Labour in Wales, really. The red map of Wales has turned a distinct shade of grey with coalition deals, with hung parties all over the place. But Labour are the big losers. Take, for example, the capital here in Cardiff. Labour used to dominate the City Hall in Cardiff here behind me. They once had 50 seats on the council. They're down now to 13 seats. They're in third place in the Welsh capital. The Lib Dems have actually held on to Cardiff and have done very well here. They're the winners across Wales, as of course are the Conservatives. The Tory party have won back the Vale of Glamorgan from Labour, and they've won it back handsomely. So both the Tories and the Lib Dems have done well in Wales, and Labour have done badly in some of those South Wales iconic valleys heartlands like Merthyr Tydfil, Torfaen, for example, and Blaen y Gwent. Three particularly very strong, solid Labour areas in the past. They have gone to no overall control. So it's very difficult for Labour to point to any successes across Wales. Rhodri Morgan, Labour's leader in Wales, was quoted as saying the tide had turned against his party. A lot of the votes, a lot of the results are still to come in, but even as it stands, it's been a very bad night for Labour in Wales.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Plenty more detail on the local elections results, of course, at bbc.co.uk/elections. You can go there and type in your postcode and find out exactly how things have turned out where you are. And that, of course, is updated across the morning and across the day as more results come in.
Yes, just to remind you, we'll be speaking to the Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg. That's in about 10 minutes' time. If you've got comments, they're all welcome, and the ways of getting in touch are on the screen now.
6:33. Let's look at this morning's other news. There's been a dramatic rise in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Figures from police forces across the country show that incidents have jumped by more than half in the past 5 years. The increase has led the Chief Constable of Northumbria to call for a ban on cheap drink deals in pubs and bars, as well as alcohol advertising.
Palestinian and Israeli officials will meet with senior politicians from around the world in London today. It's hoped the talks will restart the stalled Middle East peace process. Aid agencies say they're hoping for an end to the blockade of Gaza to allow more fuel, medicine and food into the area.
A team of British police officers is visiting Moscow to discuss security ahead of the first all-English Champions League final. They'll be working alongside Russian authorities, preparing for the 50,000 fans expected to attend the match on May the 21st at the Luzhniki Stadium.
The Olympic torch is in Hong Kong on the latest leg of a global tour that's been overshadowed by protest. It's being carried through the streets in an 8-hour relay. Chinese supporters have lined the route and there have been few protests so far.
The picturesque piazzas and stunning canal-side views of Venice have stood for hundreds of years but are now under threat from pigeons. Local officials are so worried about the mess and damage the birds' droppings cause, they've placed a ban on feeding them. Around 40,000 of the birds pass through St Mark's Square every day. Now anyone caught feeding them faces a £40 fine.
And those are the main stories this morning. Coming up on the programme, the credit crunch continues to bite. Insolvency figures are due out later today. We'll hear how businesses are having to adapt or face going to the wall.
Now though, let's have a look at the sports news, and Sue is here. Very good morning.
Good morning to you. Good night for Rangers. Probably a less good morning if you were up late last night watching that, with perhaps a few Shandies. Morning to you. Rangers will play in their first European final for 36 years. Walter Smith's sides got there after 3.5 hours of goalless football in their UEFA Cup semi-final with Fiorentina, but the night was not without drama as the Scots overcame a sending off in extra time before reaching the final on May the 14th in a penalty shootout. 10 minutes from the end of extra time, Daniel Cousin was sent off for headbutting Massimo Gobbi, his manager less than impressed by that. The 10 men of Rangers almost conceded 3 minutes from time, but Adrien Mutu's header went wide. And so it went to penalties, Rangers keeper Neil Alexander pulling off a great save to cancel out an earlier miss from captain Barry Ferguson. When Christian Vieri blasted over, it was left to Nacho Novo to slot home the winning spot kick and send Rangers through to the final in Manchester. Swansea City have been confirmed as champions of League One after Leeds United failed in their bid to have their 15-point penalty overturned. An independent arbitration panel rejected the club's appeal against the deduction because Leeds signed a document last July which saw them agree to the punishment from the Football League for breaking rules on insolvency. It means that Doncaster, Nottingham Forest and Carlisle will go into the last game of the season tomorrow, battling for the second automatic promotion spot, while Leeds know now they'll definitely have to make do with the playoffs.
Now I think we need to draw a line under this whole process. Leeds are a valued member of the Football League family, and it's time now to get back to the business of football and enjoying the climax of what has already been a great season.
Ronnie O'Sullivan and Stephen Hendry will resume their semi-final at the World Snooker Championship later on today, level at 4 frames all, but the 7-time former champion will be disappointed not to be leading. Hendry started with a clearance of 140 in the opening frame on Thursday and went 3-0 ahead before O'Sullivan got on the board. And then from 4-1 down, O'Sullivan staged a comeback. He won the last 3 frames of the opening session to leave everything to play for in the best of 33 frame match. In contrast to the combined experience of Hendry and O'Sullivan, Joe Perry
56.
and Ali Carter are both appearing in the first semi-final at the Crucible. Perry also gained an early 3-1 advantage, but he was able to hold on to it through to the end of the session. Carter did manage to win the last frame, but he'll resume 2 in arrears, Perry leading 5-3. A couple of really quick paper stories to talk you through this morning, which is quite interesting. In the Guardian Sports supplement, Sven-Göran Eriksson talks Manchester City players out of a strike. They're so agitated by the stories that Thaksin Shinawatra wants to get rid of him and bring somebody else in. Strike? Well, I mean, that was the suggestion. And this is the man who could be getting the job. Phil Scolari, of course, the man who nearly got the England job a few years ago. So when Eriksson sees that on the back of the Daily Mirror this morning, he might want to change his mind. But yes, that's stories at Manchester City coming out on a daily basis at the moment.
OK, Sue, thanks very much indeed.
Back to the elections now. It's a tradition that all parties always find something positive to say after any sort of election, even if it's just to say that someone else has done even worse than they have.
So who are the real winners and losers this morning? Jeremy Vine's been crunching the numbers for us.
Come and have a look at our map. This is the terrain that we've been fighting on, watching the council results come in on 159 councils, including all 22 in Wales. These were the colours we began with when the election votes started coming in. These were the old colours of the councils. Lots of blue. You wouldn't think there was that more the Conservatives could do. They've won a lot back and they've made gains as well. And Southampton, worth us focusing on down here on the south coast, because it's gone blue, it's gone Conservative. Now, no one was really predicting that. They got 8 seats, 8 gains on their existing count of councillors. They've taken Southampton, a city with 2 Labour MPs who will now doubtless be quaking in their boots somewhat. And the same story in Bury. 2 Labour MPs in Bury, up here in the northwest, was 2 Conservative MPs in the 90s. Well, that council has also gone from hung to Conservative. So you sense maybe some kind of tipping point in politics here. Certainly that's what the Conservatives will be hoping. Of course, it all centres on the person of the Prime Minister, 8 months into the job, and this is a horror show for Gordon Brown. Vince Cable, the Lib Dem, said he'd gone from Stalin to Mr. Bean. Well, here is Gordon's gallery. There he was at the start, in command of all he surveyed, and gradually things went wrong. The snap election was cancelled, and then suddenly, is he a politician or a comedian? It gets worse and worse, the lost data discs and Northern Rock and the 10p tax mess and so on, and we'll ask whether he's ended up as Mr. Bean. We'll have a look at these percentages. Let's just have a look going right back to 1997. This was the Tony Blair election landslide, 44%. You see this up-down effect. Labour doing well in the generals, badly in the local elections, or not as well, 29% in 2000. Winning the 2001 election, and then this 2004 figure, a record low for Labour. In 40 years they hadn't done as badly, 26%. They did come back up and win the 2005 election, and then 2007 just up from 26 at 27%. That was Tony Blair's last election, the local elections there in 2007. So now we put in Gordon Brown's first, and what happens? 24%. And you'd have to say, we're sorry, Mr. Brown, but this does make you Mr. Bean. Now, quickly, we'll look at the projected national share, the percentage that the parties are left with if you play out these local results on the national stage and extend them like that. Here's this Labour percentage, the lowest they've had for 40 years. Absolutely terrible, disastrous performance for Labour, 24%, 2% down on their previous lowest ever in 2004. As for the Conservatives, they were at 40 last year. What happened? A serious, drastic improvement for them. This is real momentum for the Conservatives here. Lib Dems, though, struggling along, 25%. Ming Campbell was thrown out after he got 26 last year. The one crumb of comfort is that 25 is bigger than 24, so the Lib Dems are in second place. That's how these council elections have left the parties on the national stage.
There we are, Jeremy Vine, and as he was suggesting, a mixed night for the Lib Dems. They've probably beaten Labour into second place, but their share of the vote has dropped.
Well, let's see what their leader is making of election night. And the morning after, Nick Clegg joins us now from Westminster. A very good morning to you. It was your first real electoral test, wasn't it, after being chosen as leader of the party? But you've seen your share of the vote go down.
For heaven's sake, we were 13% a few months ago, we're now 25%. We've overtaken Labour, we've taken seats off the Conservatives, we've taken seats off Labour. I was being told for every time I open a newspaper, the last month, I was being told it would even be a good night if we lost a number of seats. We've won seats. If you call that a disappointment, then we inhabit different planets. I am actually delighted. We are regaining momentum. Politics is very much on the move again. There's everything up for grabs. And I think we've shown in these results that we have confounded expectations and we are capable of winning places like St Albans from the Conservatives, seats off the Conservatives in Cheltenham, Colchester, Gosport, and of course against Labour in their heartlands in the north. I think that's something to be quite proud of.
You're proud of losing a percentage point from the last election?
Look, firstly, many of the results aren't in yet. Secondly, it is only the second time in our history, in the post-war period, that we've overtaken Labour as a share of the vote. And as I say, in terms of councillors, we've confounded all expectations and actually added councillors. So I really think, I understand that you need to, in a sense, clutch at straws to put a negative interpretation on these results. I think any dispassionate, objective view would suggest that we're going forward.
I suppose just your supporters might be hoping that as the new leader you would have galvanised the party and improved the share of the vote rather than lost a percentage. I mean, last year's elections 26%. Back in 2004 you had 29% share. You want to lead a party to great victories, not losing shares of the vote.
The number of seats we've won on the ground has actually gone up. We were told over the last few weeks that it would almost certainly go down. That is what counts. Now, I understand, I mean, last year I remember actually sitting, I think, in your studio, and we'd gone backwards in the number of seats, but up in the share of the vote, and all you concentrated on was the loss of the number of seats. Now, clearly it's in a sense your job to pick on the one statistic which is about even as it was last year, but I would suggest that if you actually look at the seats we're winning against both the Conservative and Labour parties, the way that we are the only meaningful opposition to Labour in their northern urban heartlands, the only meaningful opposition to the Conservatives in their southern rural heartlands, we're the only national party, curiously enough, to have been fighting these local elections. That, I think, is something which is a considerable achievement, certainly to have overtaken the Labour Party, and suggests to me that at a time when politics is really moving fast again. There's a great deal to play for, and we are very much on the front foot, regaining momentum.
And just looking at the night, it just seems to be so black and white in the fact that the clear losers were Labour last night, but the clear winners were the Conservatives. And if you're pitching yourself as an alternative, surely you would be really proud this morning to have picked up a much greater proportion of those losses and not let them go to the Conservatives.
Where are the Conservatives in Manchester? Where are the Conservatives in Newcastle? Where are the Conservatives in Hull? Where are the Conservatives in Liverpool? Where are the Conservatives in Sheffield? David Cameron himself has said that the acid test for him is to make incursions into the big urban centres of the north. The Conservatives are nowhere. Why have we been taking seats off the Conservatives in Gosport, in Cheltenham, in St Albans, in Colchester? That is the true picture of actually what's happening on the ground, rather than some fixation with one number that is likely to shift by the time the final results are all in by the end of the day in any event.
OK, Nick Clegg, Leader of the Liberal
Thank you.
Democrats, thanks very much.
Time now is 6:46 exactly. You're watching Breakfast from BBC News. The main stories this morning. Labour suffers its worst losses in local elections in England and Wales for nearly 40 years.
The Conservatives have made strong gains. They say they'll pick up 200 seats.
And coming up here on Breakfast...
I think the judges made the right choice, and I think everybody's quite happy about it.
Can I ask the question again?
Sultry, but apparently not sexy. We'll look at new research that suggests squeakier voices beat huskier tones when it comes to seduction.
There's not many men who would say that Mariella was not sexy.
The husky voice thing?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to be talking about it later.
Debatable, isn't it? What's in store for the weather this weekend? Let's find out with Carol. Morning, Carol.
Good morning. Unsettled probably sums it up quite nicely, Susanna. We're all going to see rain at times, and it's going to be a bit more disappointing than we had thought. There'll be a bit more cloud around, so it will be bright. But the common thread for the whole weekend for all of us is that it's going to be warm. Now this morning it's bright, we've got some sunshine around, chilly start, and you can see all that cloud in the Atlantic. That's coming our way, that's what's going to bring the rain later on. But first thing this morning, a little bit of patchy mist and fog around in the southeastern corner. But again, we've got 1 or 2 showers and also some sunshine. Moving up the country across the Midlands into Derbyshire and the north of England generally. Again, there'll be some sunshine, 1 or 2 showers here and there. Showers close to the borders, showers generally across Scotland as well. But again, good breaks and some sunshine and nippy first thing. Northern Ireland by 9 o'clock having a temperature of 6 degrees Celsius in Belfast amidst the sunshine, and some sunshine first thing across Wales as well. But even so, we're not immune to a shower, neither are we across the southwest of England, although generally this morning it's a fine start. In fact, for many of us it is a beautiful start to the day. However, the showers will get going through the day, and they'll be heavy, especially so across Scotland, and like the last few days we'll see some thunder and also some hail thrown in as well. Later in the day the cloud will thicken too in the southwest. Temperatures up a touch in yesterday, our maximum 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 Fahrenheit. Now through the evening a lot of the showers will die away, and we'll start to see some rain come in from the west, which will turn heavier during the course of the night. And through the course of tomorrow that will erratically move eastwards, throwing more cloud ahead of it as it does so. But there'll still be some sunshine for some, the temperature creeping up to 20, that is 68 Fahrenheit. Then on Sunday a new band of rain comes our way, again in from the west. It'll be quite windy here as well, and you can see the extent of the cloud ahead of it. Still feeling warm though, humid for some of us. And on Monday the rain band is going to move further south. Now the timing of that's a wee bit questionable at the moment, but it looks like for Scotland and Northern Ireland and the far southeast of England, Monday's looking quite nice. That's the story so far. Back to you two.
Carol, thanks very much indeed.
Let's go to Declan now. More on the effects of the credit crunch, Declan.
Yeah, we get more news about debt today, Charlie. It's thought around 25,000 people either went bankrupt or took out individual voluntary arrangements over the last 3 months. That's roughly the same as the number the last time these things were calculated. But we are expecting to hear about a rise in the number of companies going out of business. That's because small firms are being squeezed hard by the credit crunch. Now we'll hear from Stephen Allen Brittis, the man who speaks for small businesses, in just a moment. But first, to show you how tough it is, here's the story of one small company that's still in business, but it's finding life a bit of a struggle. It's IECO Paints in Sussex.
Hi, my name's Carl Nunhofer. I started IECO Natural Paints just over 3 years ago now. Our businesses closely linked to the housing market, and towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, growth hasn't been quite as good as we'd hoped because houses weren't changing hands in the local area as much as they had been. Our marketing is changing a bit in the way that we're trying to highlight the idea that decorating is one of the most cost-effective ways you can make the best of your home. So even though people may be feeling a bit strapped for cash, they can very easily do up their home by applying a bit of our lovely paint. Perhaps I'm a little bit more careful with my money at the moment, but that just may be to do with the sort of feeling of confidence that's just going round at the moment. I guess I'm a little more cautious than I would have been otherwise.
Okay, well, as you saw, Stephen Allen Bridges is here. Stephen, good morning to
Morning.
you. First of all, small businesses seem to be particularly vulnerable to the credit crunch because if the banks get tough, the small businesses have nowhere else to go.
That's right. 97% of all businesses are locked into the 4 major clearers. All their money's from the banks. They don't have equity, shareholdings, friends or relatives' money, and so if the banks get tougher, then that is very difficult for the small firm.
And we saw this in the 90s, that the real killer for companies is cash flow. They can be a really healthy business, but if the money's not coming through the door because big customers have decided to take longer paying their bills, that can hammer many small firms that really should stay in business.
Yes, they're very good, well-run businesses, but say 60 or 70% of their turnover is with a major concern. If that major concern becomes tight, tries to improve its cash flow on the backs of its suppliers by increasing its credit terms, its payment terms from 30 to 40 days, then everything else is undone for the small firm. They can be in real difficulties.
That doesn't sound like an awful lot, waiting 45 days to pay a bill instead of 30 days, but in the wrong circumstances, it can make the difference between corporate life and corporate death.
Yes, of course. Small firms are run on very tight margins, and if the money is late coming, even by 2 days, it can land them into trouble with the bank manager.
Okay, Stephen Allen Bridges from the Federation of Small Businesses, thanks for joining us. More on this story as we get it on the news channel after 9:30. More on housing in the next hour.
Declan, thanks very much. Yesterday we brought you news of the return of retro gadgetry, from the Teasmade to the trouser press. Well, now that fad is cutting it in the garden too.
Yes, it seems the humble hand mower is overtaking its electric equivalent in popularity. Well, Tim Muffet is out in the Blue Peter garden conducting a bit of his own comparison for us. Tim, what's going on there?
Well, good morning to you. Lawnmowers come in all shapes and sizes. Of course, originally they were all hand-powered, then came petrol and electric mowers, which are all right, but they are a bit noisy. Let me just switch this one off. Now, however, it does seem that when it comes to choosing mowers, more and more of us are getting back to basics.
As a nation, we love our lawns. Buying a mower, well, it's almost a rite of passage, a sign you've truly grown up. According to Which Gardening magazine, sales of hand mowers, which you might think of as being a bit old-fashioned, are booming. Where better to find out why than lawn mowing's spiritual home, the British Lawn Mower Museum in Southport. This place oozes mowing memorabilia, mowing history.
Oh my goodness, it's a 1948 Wilkinson 15-inch flexi blade.
And mowing expertise in the form of its curator, Brian.
With lawn mowing, it's a very British obsession. Really, up to the 60s and 70s, most people had a hand machine to cut a domestic lawn.
But then electric mowers came along, and with petrol power, they helped relegate those run on muscle down the popularity charts. But now things are changing once more, and hand power is coming back big time.
They're a lot more environmentally friendly. There's no pollution, there's no fuel. There's a lot less moving parts, so the maintenance is a lot less. It doesn't have to be hard work, it's nice and easy to push. Very relaxing.
But don't expect the sound of electric mowers to disappear altogether this summer. They still have their fans, which even a mowing connoisseur like Brian acknowledges.
This is nice and light to use. It's not giving quite as good a finish as the cylinder cutting machines, and I need to keep an eye on this cable.
And as for petrol mowers...
This machine's doing a really nice job, and it's easy to use because I'm just walking behind it, but a little bit noisier than the other machines.
This is one of Brian's favourite mowers of all time. It's a Ransom's Surtees, built in Ipswich in 1962, and yes, it's a hand mower. The hand mowers of today may lack its history and character, but by golly,
we seem to be embracing them once more.
Sorry, I get very emotional when it comes to British lawnmowers. Anyway, some top lawn mowing tips. Regular and often is the mantra. If you are doing lawn mowing this summer, you should be doing it roughly around once a week. And you know what? If you've got one of these in your garage, there's a good chance it might actually still work. This is a 1952 Wells, a hand mower. Look at it, absolutely lovely. And you know what? Vintage lawnmowers can fetch hundreds of pounds at the moment, so you never know, it might be worth digging around in the garage and seeing what you can find. There is a cliche to say that they don't make them like they used to, but I think many would agree that when it comes to lawnmowers, that is indeed the case.
Tim, can I just point out, it didn't appear to make any difference, the mowing bit you did then. Did
Oh,
it look
come
any
on.
different?
Come on, I've been working on this patch all morning. It's beautiful.
All right, thank you very much. Back with you later.
Looks like a lot of hard work as well, doesn't it? Trouble is, it's been so wet, it's been impossible to get out and mow the lawn, hasn't it?
Well, not if you've got a hand mower, you don't have to worry, do you?
No, well, that's true. Coming up here on Breakfast. She's back again and again. Doctor Who actress Freema Agyeman will be here to tell us about her latest incarnation as a creepy clone.
Memories are lie. Time now to get your local news where you are.
Good morning. The Conservatives say David Cameron is on course to become Prime Minister after they took control of Bury, a key target in last night's local elections. The town was seen as a barometer of the national mood, and the Tories gained the 3 seats they needed to win power there. Annabelle Tiffin reports.
Jubilant scenes in Bury as the Tories took control of the council for the first time since 1986. They needed 3 seats, and by 1:30 in the morning, it was mission accomplished.
Absolutely delighted. This has taken 22 years for Bury to come back and take control of Bury Council, overall control. It's been brilliant.
Bury Council was the Conservatives' key target in the country, so the result wasn't a massive surprise, but still a bitter pill for Labour to swallow.
It was a better night for Labour in Liverpool, though, where they gained 4 seats. At one stage, they wiped out the Liberal Democrats' majority, but the Democrats hung on to power by persuading a former Labour councillor to join their ranks. However, the Liberal Democrats did relinquish control of Pendle and Labour lost control of Oldham. Other news now, and a crash on Merseyside last night in which a 17-year-old was killed and 4 other people were injured has been referred to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It happened as 2 cars were being followed in Bootle by an unmarked police car. A teenager has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. A prison officer and 3 inmates have been injured during a serious disturbance at Risley Jail in Warrington. The prison service says a series of fights broke out in the exercise yard last night. A prison officer was hurt as staff sought to quell the trouble. Up to 100 fuel protesters briefly blocked the entrance to the Stanlow oil refinery in Cheshire last night. At one stage, they prevented a number of tankers getting through. Cheshire Police cleared the road and access to the plant returned to normal. The protesters, mainly farmers and hauliers, are angry at the amount of tax on fuel. Now here's a look at the weather with Laura Tobin.
Good morning. Well, we saw some showers around yesterday. There's more on the cards for today, but better news, there will be more in the way of sunshine and less in the way of showers, not just this morning, but as we head through the day as well. From the word go, for most it'll be a fine, dry, bright start as we step outside, but the sun getting to work on the cloud, bubbling up and producing just 1 or 2 showers. By and large, it will be dry for many. The southerly winds bringing warmer air again, highs of 13 or 14 degrees today. The showers soon dying out as we head through this evening. Clear and dry for a time, but then cloud will thicken from the west with outbreaks of rain. Temperatures falling to around about 7 or 8 degrees. So to start the bank holiday weekend, a bit of a cloudy, damp one, scattered showers expected on Saturday, cloudy and wet on Sunday, but at least with the southerly winds, it looks set to turn quite a bit warmer.
Travel news now, and in Cheshire, the M6 northbound's closed after an accident between Middlewich Homes Chapel and Knutsford. And the East Lancs Road in Lee is partially blocked due to an overturned lorry at Warrington Road. That's it for now. I'm back at 7:25.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Susanna Reid and Charlie State.
A terrible night for Gordon Brown and Labour. The Lib Dems could beat them into third place. It's their worst election performance since the 1960s.
Tory joy, they get well over 40% of the vote and say they'll pick up 200 seats.
Good morning, it's Friday the 2nd of May.
Also had this morning a 50% leap in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Police say cheap alcohol is to blame.
Rangers cap a memorable week for British football as Walter Smith's side reached the UEFA Cup final.
Coming clean about your cash, would you admit how much you earn to your friends and your neighbours?
I won't tell you.
Why not?
Because maybe I'm not making too much, as much as I should.
When it comes to mowing the lawn, forget petrol, power or electricity. Hand mowers are back in vogue. I'll find out why a little later.
Thanks. And first, our main story this morning. It's been a terrible night for the government in local elections across England and Wales. Labour are on course for their worst electoral performance in nearly 40 years.
Yes, the Conservatives say they're confident of picking up 200 seats. The Liberal Democrats look to have beaten Labour into third place.
Well, with nearly two-thirds of the results in, here's how things stand. The Conservatives have won 45 councils. That's up 8. Labour have won 14. That's a loss of 6. The Lib Dems got 6 councils. That's down 1. And 36 councils were hung, and that is a drop of 1.
In the BBC's projected national share of the vote, the Conservatives are at 44%. That's 20 points ahead of Labour on 24%, who've been beaten into third place by the Liberal Democrats on 25%, with others on 7%. Well, our political correspondent Vicky Young has been following developments overnight. Vicky, there's no way of disguising this one. It is bad for Labour.
It is, and they were prepared for a bad night, but I think they'll be pretty shocked at what they've been seeing. Remember that Gordon Brown came in 10 months ago, took over from Tony Blair, offering fresh ideas, a new leadership style, trying to turn things around for Labour. But his first test at the polls has been a disaster, and it's left the Tories riding high.
Harris Jacqueline Maureen, 1,656.
Jubilant Conservatives celebrate in Bury, taking control of the council here, a sign, they say, that the party can beat Labour in its heartlands. The news was bad for Labour in the south of England too, with an unexpected loss in Southampton. For Cabinet Ministers, it was time to put on a brave face.
I'm proud of what we've done over the last 10 years, and I think we've now got to go back to voters and say, we've heard about the issues you're talking about. We're going to get through the difficult time we've got at the moment with the international credit crunch and food prices and petrol and so on, and we will get back to what you've enjoyed over the last 10 years in the south, and that has been, for the great majority of people, rising standards of living, better public services.
After mounting criticism of his leadership, Gordon Brown has already said he's listening and learning. But Labour's worst performance in local elections since the late 60s will leave his MPs jittery and the Conservatives on a high.
I think the Labour Party has left tonight licking its wounds. It's had a very, very bad night. It deserves to have had a very, very bad night. It's now entirely up to Labour whether or not it actually listens to people and understands that it has got things wrong and that it's not just entitled to be in power.
For the Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg, it's been a mixed night, losing West Lindsey and Pendle, but gaining Hull and St Albans. But a big plus is pushing Labour into third place.
I'm actually delighted. We are regaining momentum. Politics is very much on the move again. There's everything up for grabs. And I think we've shown in these results that we have confounded expectations and we are capable of winning places like St Albans from the Conservatives, seats off the Conservatives in Cheltenham, Colchester, Gosport, and of course against Labour in their heartlands in the north.
Ministers are blaming Labour's poor performance on mid-term blues and difficult economic circumstances. But with the party losing seats in traditional Labour areas across Wales and England, their thoughts will turn anxiously to a general election.
Now, of course, it's important to say it's not a general election, but inevitably it's about mood and momentum. I think Labour MPs will be pretty downcast. The Tories will be buoyant that the momentum is still going on. And I think the Lib Dems will be pretty pleased. They've gained councils when everyone said that they wouldn't.
Vicky, for the moment, thank you very much.
Well, Londoners have also been voting for a mayor and a new assembly, but those results won't appear until much later today. David Thompson is our correspondent at City Hall for us this morning. And looking ahead, David, what do we see?
Well, good morning from London and good morning from City Hall, which is the city's heart seat of power. Looking ahead, the Conservatives are pretty bullish about their chances. They think their man Boris Johnson's done enough to unseat Ken Livingstone. But Ken Livingstone's people think there's been a high turnout, and they hope that's enough to see their man back in power. Now, we won't know the results until probably about 7 or 8 o'clock this evening, but there's still all to play for, I think. Although the votes are in, London's made up its mind.
David Thompson reporting for us. Thanks very much. And
yes, just to let you know, there is a lot more detail on the local election results at bbc.co.uk/elections. If you go there, type in your postcode and then you can find out how things have turned out where you are.
Yes, of course, that is updated throughout the morning and throughout the day as all those results come in. We've already heard from the Lib Dem leader, Nick Clegg, this morning. We will bring you reaction from the Conservatives after 8 o'clock here on Breakfast. We will also get the government's reaction from Harriet Harman in about 5 minutes' time.
And if you've got some thoughts of your own, send us them in the usual way. Details should be on the screen now.
6 minutes past 7. Let's look at this morning's other news now. There has been a dramatic rise in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Figures from police forces across the country show that incidents have jumped by more than half in the past 5 years.
It's not a pretty sight. Women falling out of pubs, barely able to walk or talk. But police say it's becoming more and more common. The police figures show a 50% rise in the number of females arrested for drunk and disorderly compared to 5 years ago. From 2003 to 2004, 85 women were held for being drunk in Cheshire. Last year that rose to 200. In Essex, the numbers are up from 112 to 204 for the same period. And in North Yorkshire, the figures went from 135 to 209. Police say supermarkets are partly to blame for the increase in the number of women who are binge drinking because they offer cheap alcohol. And the finger is also being pointed at pubs and clubs that target women with special offers and happy hour drinking. In the past, adverts have been used to try to educate people about the dangers of alcohol, but it appears that the message isn't getting through. The authorities say more action is needed and that calling time on cheap drink, happy hours and alcohol advertising would be a good place to start. Wendy Urquhart, BBC News.
Palestinian and Israeli officials will meet with senior politicians from around the world in London today. It's hoped the talks will restart the stalled Middle East peace process. Aid agencies say they're hoping for an end to the blockade of Gaza to allow more fuel, medicine and food into the area.
A team of British police officers is visiting Moscow to discuss security ahead of the first All-English Champions League final. They'll be working alongside Russian authorities, preparing for the 50,000 fans expected to attend the match on May the 21st at the Luzhniki Stadium.
Hollywood actress Uma Thurman has been in court to face a man accused of stalking her. The Kill Bill star said his letter writing and attempts to meet her left her feeling panicked and frightened.
Not a day Uma Thurman's looked forward to.
Accomplished today.
And far from the kind of entrance the star normally makes. This is the man who's been described as a menacing presence in the lives of her family, former psychiatric patient Jack Jordan. Between 2005 and 2007, he called them and sent constant letters and emails, like this postcard Uma Thurman read out in court. Highlighted are the words, "My hands should be on your body at all times." Face to face with Jack Jordan for the first time, the star looked visibly upset, her voice shaking as she described how she'd feared for her life and been scared to go home because he was sleeping outside in his car. His lawyers say he's not criminal, just creepy.
The outcome I'm hoping for is that the jury sees that even though his actions seemed obsessive and excessive, that he never ever formed the intent to annoy, threaten, alarm, or harass her, and he didn't think that he was scaring her at the time.
Prosecutors admit that in some ways unwanted attention is an occupational hazard with fame like this, but they say it's time to tell Jack Jordan enough is enough. Heather Alexander, BBC News, New York.
The Olympic torch is in Hong Kong on the latest leg of a global tour that's been overshadowed by protest. It's being carried through the streets in an 8-hour relay. Chinese supporters have lined the route, which is being supervised by 3,000 police officers.
A teddy bear has become a surrogate mum to a baby monkey born at London Zoo. Little Conchita's mother is too ill to care for her. She's only the second white-naped manga bay monkey ever born in the UK. It's one of the most endangered species in the world.
When she's a little bit older and she's on solid food, we will then begin the reintroduction process, probably in about another 2 to 3 months. We'll start with her mum, obviously, and see how that goes, and then moving on to the other members of the group, and then finally the father.
Oh, it's the real R moment of the morning.
Tiny little arm.
Oh, no. Those are this morning's top news stories. In sport, Rangers are through to the UEFA Cup final. Their first European showpiece since they lifted the Cup Winners' Cup in 1972.
Yes, we'll have more on that and the rest of the sport with Sue. That's in 25 minutes' time.
Yeah, 11 minutes past 7. The government is having to come to terms with a very bad night in the local elections in England and Wales. Labour recorded its worst performance since the 1960s.
Yes, it's a very different story for the Conservatives. They say they're expecting to gain 200 seats. Now, traditionally, the party does well in the southeast. Let's find out how they did there. Our correspondent Paul Seagert is in Hastings for us this morning. Paul, just give us a sense of the picture in the southeast.
Well, of course, they have done very well in the southeast. They traditionally do, but it hasn't been a good a night here as perhaps it has been in other parts of the country. They started off wanting to gain 2 seats, 2 councils that were hung. They were the councils of Maidstone and Hastings, but in Hastings they put a lot of work into trying to win Hastings in the run-up to the election. We saw David Cameron coming to town to try and woo Tory support and trying to win over some of those floating voters, but they didn't quite take control here, although they came very, very close, because there was 1 seat which they needed to win and there were 6 recounts. They couldn't be separated, the Conservative candidate and the Lib Dem candidate. They had to draw lots. The Lib Dem candidate won, and that actually stopped the Conservatives winning control of Hastings. It doesn't come much closer than that, but just up the road from Hastings in Maidstone, another seat they were hoping to win, a seat that's actually been hung for 25 years. The Conservatives hadn't controlled it since 1982, but in the early hours of this morning they gained the 2 seats they needed, and now the Conservatives control Maidstone, and indeed they now control every single council in Kent.
Paul, thank you very much for that.
Labour's Deputy Leader Harriet Harman is in Westminster. A very good morning. Well, I say a very good morning, Harriet Harman. It's not a very good morning, is it?
No, it isn't. It's very disappointing, and I think that we've got to really listen to what people were saying when they were, expressing their views in the election yesterday.
Yes, they have spoken, of course. You've got 24% of the vote. That pushes you behind the Liberal Democrats. You're in 3rd place, and it's the worst result since the 1960s. It's a pretty clear message, isn't it, from the voters?
Well, it is, and I think that, as I say, we have got to reflect on it and listen to what people are saying. I mean, that's the whole point about having elections in our democracy. And I think that one of the things that we were hearing loud and clear and have got to reflect on is that people are concerned about their own financial situation, and in that respect these council elections have been different from other council elections really that have been taking place over the last 11 years, in that people are concerned about rising food prices and the increase in fuel bills, and there is a worry about the financial instability, and we've got to really recognise those concerns and do absolutely everything we can to make sure that people are protected from the economic problems that are out there.
Yes, and it might be said that the time for listening is not necessarily these elections. The time for listening was before that. I mean, particularly on something like the abolition of the 10p tax rate, which was, suggested, introduced last year. Lots of people complaining about that. That was clearly going to have a big impact on people, particularly in your key heartlands where you have lost out in these elections. Listening to voters after the election is too late, isn't it?
Well, we have taken steps to protect people, those groups of people who were going to lose out from the 10p tax rate change.
So we'd already, aren't you?
Well, we'd already acknowledged that, and that we should have acted earlier on the two groups, particularly that weren't being compensated and were going to lose out. And we've already acknowledged that, and we're already moving on that, and we'll do that. But I think that there are wider concerns into which the 10p tax rate issues played, and we're very determined to listen, and we're very determined too to make sure that there continue to be low unemployment in the economy, and that people can still have jobs. I mean, that is absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
And we're concerned too to make sure that the economy continues to grow. So we've got to listen to what people are saying and be very clear about ensuring that we protect the country's economy from the buffeting that it's getting internationally.
At the latest projection, this result, if it happened at a general election, would give the Tories something like a 138-seat Commons majority. It's a mountain to climb. Is Gordon Brown the right man to listen and to lead that ascent?
Oh, absolutely, and I think against the background of economic concerns, really there is nobody with more experience and more commitment to take the country through. And I think the increased share of the vote that the Conservatives have had yesterday, what it will do is make people look at what the Tories are actually offering. What is their alternative?
Well, they have looked at what the Tories are offering and look at the result in the election.
Well, I think they haven't come under serious scrutiny, and they have been really saying that everything that they want, they think that people want them to say, and everything the last person said they want to hear, they say it. But I think their actual policies for how Britain will go forward don't add up and won't bear scrutiny. And I think
are you not concerned that Gordon Brown has been under serious scrutiny for the last 10 months and has achieved what is the worst election result since the 1960s in these elections?
Well, I think that we all think these are disappointing results, and we recognise the difficult economic context with people feeling the pinch. We recognise too the part that the 10p tax rate changes played in that, but I think that we're determined to listen and confident to take the country forward, and we do expect that there will be more scrutiny on the Tories' policies, and I think that the shallowness and the hollowness of them will be exposed as that happens.
Harriet Harman, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
And the time now is 17 minutes past 7. Coming up on the programme today.
You really need a figure. It's a little bit personal. I make about £500 a week.
Would you tell your friends and colleagues how much you earn? We'll be finding out how being more honest could be the way to tackle the pay gap between the sexes.
The fundamental things apply as time goes by.
His celebrity admirers included Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. The Grammy Award-winning singer Jack Jones is here to tell us about his 50th anniversary UK tour.
So smooth.
So smooth, just like Carol. Morning.
Good morning.
What's happening in the background?
Well, actually, that's Tim cutting the grass, and I have to say he's not doing a very good job. Put your backboard into it, Tim, for goodness sake. I don't know if it's good weather this weekend for cutting the grass or not, because we've almost got a bit of everything. There will be rain at times, there's going to be quite a bit of cloud around as well, but it'll be much warmer than it has been. This morning too, it's fairly bright, but it is a chilly start to the day, but the temperatures will pick up quite quickly. Now you can see in the Atlantic a big lump of cloud. That's what's going to bring us the rain later on today, in fact probably the heaviest rain later on tonight. But this morning in the southeast there is some patchy mist and some patchy fog around. That will disperse fairly readily, and we're looking at some sunshine or bright spells and the cloud thick enough in parts just to produce the odd shower. As we move up into the north of England, it's a very similar story. Again, some patchy mist around, a little bit of cloud here and there, and some showers. Showers too across Scotland, but there'll also be some sunshine. And of course this is a picture at 9 o'clock, not the current picture. Northern Ireland, a glorious start to the day, 6 degrees Celsius in Belfast by 9. And then as we swing across the Irish Sea into Wales and the southwest of England, again, sunshine and showers first thing this morning. So then, for the rest of the day, we continue with some showers, the heaviest of which are likely to be across Scotland, and here they'll have some hail and also some thunder and lightning thrown in as well. Temperatures up a touch from what we had yesterday. We're looking at a high right about 18 degrees Celsius, which is 64 Fahrenheit. Then later in the day, the cloud will thicken in the southwest of England, also the southwest of Wales, and we'll see some drizzly rain. Now, if anything, through the course of the coming night, that rain will pep up and turn a bit heavier in western areas. And through the course of tomorrow, it will erratically move east, and ahead of it, there'll also be a bit more cloud. So the further southeast that you are, the better chance you have of seeing the sunshine. 20 degrees Celsius is 68 Fahrenheit. Then on Sunday, more rain sweeps in from the west. It too is moving east, for a bit of cloud ahead of it. Still feeling warm. In fact, for some of us, it will feel quite humid. And the rain band on Monday looks like it's going to erratically move southeastwards. The exact placement of it, we're not 100% sure of at the moment, but currently it looks like the far north and the far southeast should see a fine day. And that's it. Back to you two.
Thanks, Carol.
And let's mix to Declan, who is at the Stock Exchange. What have you got for us, Declan?
Hello, you two. Good morning, everyone. We get more news about debt today. We're expecting to hear that the number of people who've gone bankrupt or who have taken out IVAs is going to stay pretty high, around 25,000 over 3 months. We're also expecting to hear, though, that there's been a rise in the number of companies going out of business. Those figures out at 9:30. We'll have them for you on the news channel as they emerge. And in the next 40 minutes or so, the Halifax will tell us what it thinks is happening to the housing market. Now, remember, earlier this week, the Nationwide said house prices were now lower than they were a year ago, so we'll be watching closely to see what the Halifax says after it. And more than half of us think we are going to cut back on our holiday spending this year. This is according to research for a currency card provider. It says that higher living costs at home and fears of a recession will make us cut back when we go on our summer break. And that, by the way, isn't a mistake. Shares really were unchanged on the market yesterday.
How often does that happen, Declan?
I've been here, what, 7 years, 8 years? I can't remember the last time we had a zero on the board at the end of the day.
Really?
Well,
there we
there
go.
you
Historic
go.
moment.
Thanks, Declan.
Declan, thanks very much.
Now, when it comes to chatting with friends and colleagues, many of us happy to talk about social and personal lives, but would you ever tell them how much you earn?
Well, apparently 2/3 of us are willing to do just that. In a moment, we'll be speaking to the money expert Jasmine Birtles and to the entrepreneur and apprentice winner Tim Campbell. First, we asked these people to share their salary secrets.
Oh, very uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, you tend to keep that personal, isn't it?
Couldn't tell you straight off the top of my head. About 40,000, something around that.
I'm going to start a job soon and I'll be getting paid about £150 a week.
And he'll brag about that, so he feels more than comfortable. I earn round about £6.50 an hour, which is not very much.
You really need a figure. It's a little bit personal. Oh, I make about £500 a week.
Not comfortable, sorry.
I feel as well uncomfortable because I don't want that everyone would know how much I earn.
I won't tell you.
Why not?
Because maybe I'm not making too much, as much as I should, or as much as I would. That's the only reason. But maybe also there might be some friends who are watching me, and then my ex-wife might find out that also how much money I'm making. I don't want to go back to court again.
Come on then. Cards on the table. Jasmine, if I ask you straight up, how much do you earn, are you going to tell us?
I probably wouldn't know, actually, because I work for myself.
You're getting out of it. That's not the answer. Will you tell us how much you earn?
No, I probably wouldn't, but
Tim,
I think other people should.
Will you tell us how much you earn?
I think it's a very personal thing.
So it's a no?
It's a no. I think this study is some executive PR from an agency who wants to promote themselves, but it's really about people in Britain particularly. We're not happy about sharing that information. It's a very personal thing.
It is. We should be, though. Honestly, we should be a lot more open about it. I am amazed that people will talk about every sexual position, every partner they've had. They will not talk.
You're talking to some interesting people. Who are these people?
We need to come more round for dinner than here.
I get your point. We're open about a lot of things.
Thank you,
but
yes.
we're not open
Yes,
about money, are we? Now,
No.
interestingly, there is this suggestion that if we were, particularly as women, if we were more open about salaries, it might be quite revealing in that women and men doing exactly the same job, the woman might discover she's earning significantly less than a man. So for that reason, do you think we should be more open and honest?
Well, yes, I think, you know, if if I'm really honest, I think we should be a lot more open and honest. I think it should be just something, they're just numbers, and we shouldn't be so personal about it. And as you say, it would be good for women, because on the whole, women earn about 83% of what men earn. And I think that there are many disparities in what people earn. But on the other hand, you could have people doing the same job, and one is doing it considerably better than the other. So maybe they should be being paid more.
Tim, what do you see as the downside of everyone knowing what everyone else earns? What's the problem?
I just think the argument about the pay gap is the emphasis is often on the individual, the employee to actually find out any information. I think the emphasis should be on the employer. We should have pay audits, etc., which are constructed at a much higher level. We're making sure the emphasis is on good employers to make sure they're paying equal levels of staff. Often it's the case where particularly women have to go and do little searches to find out what their neighbours earning before they can actually put a tribunal for it. And I think the emphasis should be on the other way.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it, Jasmine? Because it's not just about us socially talking, chatting, gossiping about what we earn. It's about trying to get that information from an employer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And sometimes they're not that forthcoming about that information.
No, absolutely. And this is where trade unions come in. That is the usefulness of trade unions. And certainly there are businesses, for example, in Brazil, there's a marvellous businessman called Ricardo Semler. I'm sure you know Ricardo. Now, in his business, Semco, everybody, the cleaners and the top people, they all have access to the accounts, the business accounts. Everybody knows what everybody's earning. They vote on what everybody else earns. They have a huge list of people desperate to go and work for that company, and it does work.
The anomaly, of course, is we're all fascinated in what other people earn, aren't we?
Yes.
I mean, you know, there is that thing. You want to say what you earn, but you want to know what they earn.
Yeah. Well, when the Italian government released all these figures about the people's pay, they were inundated with requests, people searching out. We love this bit about being nosy, but the reality should be about, we should be making sure that we review equality law to making sure that there's actual bite behind this, because we've had fair equality law for years and years, but still the pay gap persists. So it shows there's a gap there somewhere.
That you're going to be back later on, because your salary was revealed on national television, wasn't it, at one stage, which led to a few requests for a pint in the pub, didn't it?
It did indeed.
People you hadn't met before.
You can never say you haven't got any money anymore.
No,
that's the
thing.
You can't get away.
Good to see you this morning. We'll see you a little bit later on here on Breakfast.
Yes, coming up here on Breakfast, Tim Moffat's looking at the cutting edge of lawnmower fashions.
It's gone. I tell you, it's going to look great by the time I've finished it. When it comes to mowing the lawn, more and more of us are shunning electric and petrol mowers, it seems, and opting for a back-to-basics hand-powered mower instead. I'll be finding out why a little later. First, the news and the weather, where you are.
Good morning. The Conservatives say David Cameron is on course to become Prime Minister after they took control of Bury, a key target in last night's local elections. The town was seen as a barometer of the national mood, and the Tories gained the 3 seats they needed to win power there. Annabelle Tiffin reports.
Jubilant scenes in Bury as the Tories took control of the council for the first time since 1986. They needed 3 seats, and by 1:30 in the morning, it was mission accomplished.
Absolutely delighted. This has taken 22 years for Bury to come back and take control of Bury Council, overall control. It's been brilliant.
Bury Council was the Conservatives' key target in the country, so the result wasn't a massive surprise, but still a bitter pill for Labour to swallow.
It was a bad night for Labour nationally. They performed well in Liverpool. At one stage, they wiped out the Liberal Democrats' majority in the city, but they regained power by persuading a former Labour councillor to defect. Our political editor David Woodthorpe reports.
Smiles in Liverpool as Labour made 4 gains and the Liberal Democrats lost control of the council for the first time in 10 years. But a swift bit of political horse trading saw an independent councillor join the Lib Dem ranks, and the town hall was once again theirs, to the anger of Labour.
As far as I'm concerned, it was a good night for the Labour Party here. The fact that an independent is defected to prop up a failed administration is clearly not good for the city of Liverpool. As far as we're concerned, the people are disillusioned, disheartened with the Liberal Democrats, and that's why we've took 4 seats.
Elsewhere, Labour lost 7 seats in Oldham and fell behind the Lib Dems, and 4 seats in Wigan. In Pendle, the Lib Dems lost 8 seats and control of the council.
One of the strongest supporters of Greater Manchester's proposed congestion charge lost his seat last night. Councillor Roger Jones, the chairman of the area's Passenger Transport Authority, was beaten by a community action candidate in Salford. And you can find out the election results in your area by logging on to bbc.co.uk/news and typing in your postcode. In other news now, a crash on Merseyside last night in which a 17-year-old was killed and 4 other people injured has been referred to the Independent Police Complaints Commission. It happened as 2 cars were being followed in Bootle by an unmarked police car. A teenager has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. A prison officer and 3 inmates have been injured during a serious disturbance at Risley Jail in Warrington. The prison service says a series of fights broke out in the exercise yard at about 6:45 last night. A prison officer was hurt as staff sought to quell the trouble. The 3 injured inmates needed hospital treatment. Up to 100 fuel protesters briefly blocked the entrance to the Stanlow oil refinery in Cheshire last night. At one stage, they prevented a number of tankers getting through, but Cheshire Police cleared the road and access to the plant returned to normal. The protesters, mainly farmers and hauliers, are angry at the amount of tax on fuel.
Just give us a 2p back on the fuel and have either the government use their powers, as they have done to rob us all, to get escalators set up for the haulage industry, agricultural industry, or give them a tax rebate on it.
And to look at today's weather, a dry start, then a mixture of sunny spells and heavy, possibly thundery showers dying out towards the evening. Tonight, a little rain developing in mostly western areas later in the night with a low of 7. Travel news now, and in Cheshire, the M6 northbound's closed due to accident investigation work between Middlewich Holmes Chapel and Knutsford. It's not expected to open until about 9 o'clock, and the East Lancs Road in Lee is blocked at Warrington Road. I'm back in half an hour.
Very good morning. You're watching Breakfast. Charlie State and Susanna Reid.
Our main story this morning. It's been a terrible night for the government in local elections across England and Wales. Labour are on course for their worst electoral performance in nearly 40 years.
The Conservatives say they're confident of picking up 200 seats. The Liberal Democrats look to have beaten Labour into 3rd place.
With nearly 2/3 of the results in, here's how things stand. The Conservatives have won 45 councils. That's up 8. Labour have won 14, a loss of 6. The Lib Dems got 6 councils, that's down 1, and 36 councils were hung, a drop of 1.
In the BBC's projected national share of the vote, the Conservatives are at 44%. That's 20 points ahead of Labour on 24%, who've been beaten into 3rd place by the Liberal Democrats on 25%, with others on 7%. Well, Labour's Deputy Leader Harriet Harman told Breakfast it had been a disappointing night and said the government would learn from the experience.
Well, I think that we all think these are disappointing results, and we recognise the difficult economic context with people feeling the pinch. We recognise too the part that the 10p tax rate changes played in that, but I think that we're determined to listen and confident to take the country forward.
Well, our political correspondent Vicky Young has been following developments overnight. Vicky, however you look at it, it was a very bad night for Labour, wasn't it?
It was, and you can see Harry Harman, they're just trying to put a brave face on it, really, talking a lot about the economic situation, and she says that Gordon Brown is the best placed person to get Britain through that problem when it comes. I think the thing now is about the mood amongst Labour backbenchers. Will they feel they can turn this round before a general election, and will they feel that Gordon Brown's the right person to do that, or do we then have the possibility of some kind of leadership contest? It doesn't seem that that's possible at the moment. The Tories, I think, will be delighted that momentum is definitely going in their direction. I think David Cameron had to prove yet again that he could get beyond that 40% share of the vote, which he's done, so they'll be very pleased about that. And the Liberal Democrats, I think, will be pleased because everyone was saying they would lose councillors. Actually, they are gaining councillors. Nick Clegg probably hasn't made the impact yet that he would like to, but I don't think there's any suggestion that his job is on the line. So overall, they'll be pleased to have pushed Labour into 3rd place.
Vicky, thanks for your overview.
Yes, and we will be hearing from the Conservatives a little later in the programme. Let's show you some pictures just come in this morning. One very happy man, there he is, David Cameron, off to pick up his newspapers.
Yes, of course, you won't be able to read about his successes. Results came too late to make the front pages. He can read about them on our website. Plenty more detail on the local elections results, bbc.co.uk/elections. You could go there yourself, type in your postcode, find out exactly how things have turned out where you are, and that is updated across the day as the results come in. Londoners have to wait until tea time today to find out who the Mayor of London will be.
Yes, and there's much more on the elections to come on breakfast. Jeremy Vines, using his box of tricks to crunch the numbers for us, will be live in Wales, where every council has been up for grabs. Let's look at this morning's other news now. There's been a dramatic rise in the number of women arrested for being drunk and disorderly. Figures from police forces across the country show that incidents have jumped by more than half in the past 5 years. The increase has led the Chief Constable of Northumbria to call for a ban on cheap drink deals in pubs and bars, as well as alcohol advertising.
Palestinian and Israeli officials will meet with senior politicians from around the world in London today. It's hoped the talks will